There was a silence of 3 parts. One was the sound of no traffic for a change out the window on a quiet Philadelphia street one evening in October. The other was the sound of waves lapping in the distance on my Alexa app that I just told to stop because I wanted it to be silent. That wasn't so silent out on the street. The third, there is no third because I'm talking. Welcome to my finally doing a review about a book that's really popular, especially on the internet. The Name of the Wind. I know this is like opening a can of worms or a can of air. I don't know, of wind. It's opening a tempest of Pandora's box, if you will. But this is the 10th anniversary. Beautiful, like red pages. Beautiful cover of a broken lute. But this is the 10th anniversary hardcover edition of The Name of the Wind. I had to pick this one up, obviously. So The Name of the Wind is one of the most prolific or most well-received, I don't even know what to call it, but most silently popular fantasy novels of the last, 2 decades. Because it came out in 2007, the first one, I believe, and this 10th anniversary came out in 2017 then, or maybe it was 2006 and 16. But anyway, when it came out, it was such a hit. It was like a sleeper hit with fans. I don't know if it received a ton of mainstream success because, let's face it, any kind of fantasy novel that isn't immediately adapted to the screen or to television or whatever isn't usually going to be as popular as those that are. Or there are talks right now, since this is such a musically inclined fantasy. Actually, Lin-Manuel Miranda has plans to adapt it to I believe a Netflix show or something, like an Amazon show, a show, but the way shows are done now, like on the internet through a streaming service. And I definitely, as well as Patrick Rothfuss, the author, I trust Lin-Manuel Miranda to do a good job with it. I think he's the right man for the job. But Patrick Rothfuss, let's talk a minute about Patrick Rothfuss. He has a major internet presence. I doubt he's watching this, so I don't know how many videos about his work that he watches, and there's probably a ton of internet discussion about his work. And he is a vlogger as well, and he's very candid and public about his work. So he has quite a presence, and I really admire that and think that's really awesome. He's really in touch with the fans. He's been writing the 3rd book. So this series, The Name of the Wind, or this book, is the first one in a series called The Kingkiller Chronicle. The second one, The Wise Man's Fear, it has been out for about 10 years now. And there's also been a novella in the middle of it called The Slow Regard of Silent Things. These are all, aside from the novella, these are all monstrously big, ambitious novels. So it's kind of mind-blowing and almost no wonder that he's been working on the 3rd and final in this arc novel for a decade now. And fans are, just like with George R.R. Martin, fans are like, where is it? Hey, Mr. Rothfuss, where's the 3rd book? We want to see how the series ends. And yeah, I mean, I want to see how the series ends, but yeah, you can't rush greatness. Let me put it to you this way. I recommend this book, The Name of the Wind, and the series in general to a lot of people because it's so great. The Name of the Wind is great as just a standalone novel alone, even though it doesn't technically conclude. But if the 3rd book never comes out, if Patrick Rothfuss never writes the final chapter of this story, and we don't know how the main character, Kavoth, goes from child prodigy / hero / infamous anti-hero, whatever he becomes, to this unassuming man running a bar or a tavern in the middle of nowhere. If we never see how that gap is bridged, I'm still glad I read the first 2 books in the series because they were just worth it. Just the experience. It's about the journey, not the destination, right? But anyway, so So that's where I'm at with that. I'm still going to recommend and review this book. So the name of the wind. What happens in this? So the way I met this novel, so there's several ways that. So I'm a huge fan of the band Nightwish. They're one of my favorite bands, if not my absolute favorite band of all time. And Thomas, the band leader, he primary songwriter, he is a huge fan of Rothfuss as well, and draws a lot of inspiration from this series for his lyrics, for a lot of his songs, especially in more recent records that they've released. So I was like, what is the Edie Maru? There's a song on the Nightwish album, on the first one with Floor Jansen, called Edie Maru, and I was like, what does that mean? Is it like a weird science? There was a lot of science in that one, so I thought maybe it was like a scientific term, but no, it was a made-up term by Patrick Rothfuss. And then Thomas started a band called Ari, who is a character from this novel, and the Ari albums, they just released their second album, really fantastically great. I almost like Ari as much as, if not more, than some of the more recent Nightwish albums. I just love Ari. And it's basically a fan project. It's basically a tribute project to to the Kingkiller Chronicles. And yeah, I mean, that music, to me, the first Ari album and the second one now are the soundtrack to The Name of the Wind and to The Wise Man's Fear, for instance. That's how deeply ingrained, how connected my experience with these books is to that music. So anyway, I definitely recommend those albums, Nightwish in general, because they're an amazing band, and I recommend the Ari albums for anyone who's a fan of, well, for anyone, but especially if you've read The Name of the Wind, listen to Ari, because I think you'll connect with them. But so I was into this music. I was listening to Nightwish, and I was like, what's this side project? I got into that at the same time as I was in graduate school, and for a class, a group of us were reading The Name of the Wind for a project. And the way it was posed was like, oh, well, this is sort of like a Harry Potter-ish young adult coming-of-age novel that happens to be a fantasy about a young boy who learns magic and goes to a university for it. Sound familiar? And yeah, at first I was like, well, wait, this is like a Harry Potter knockoff, and I know better than that. It's about how the author does it, not the concept. This is way different from Harry Potter. Let me just say that right off the bat. You're a lot more like in the main character's head. Nothing against Harry Potter and the connection to that character, but Kvothe, the main character of The Name of the Wind. First of all, his origin story, I don't know if it's more traumatic than like what Harry Potter would, for instance, went through, like losing his parents and everything. But Kvothe too loses his parents at the beginning of this novel. I'm going to go into it. I'm going to try not to spoil it, but in order to give away some of the premise, I have to give away some of the details that happen at the beginning of this book. So Kvothe, he's a young boy. He grows up. He's growing up at a young age in a traveling theater troupe, basically, which I latched onto immediately. I thought that was so cool. There are these bards, these songwriters and traveling minstrels, basically, who are vagabonds, and they don't have one place that they call home, but they call their family home and the people they travel with. And so Kvothe is super attached and close to his parents and all the people who travel in their caravans with them. And they play songs and they play shows and they go from town to town, and they're supported by like the barony, basically. And it's a good life. It's even for this setting, this fantasy setting, it is an unusual way of life. Most people do have homes or live in a city or whatever, but this group of artists do that. And so the whole premise of this, unlike Harry Potter, this is centered in the concept of performance and storytelling and music. Kvothe becomes a victim of his family's murder at the hands of the big bads, this organization called the Chandrian. They're like magical, well, I don't know how to describe the Chandrian, because they're bad guys who are trying to protect their own secrets, which is why they kill Kvothe's parents, is because Kvothe's parents, especially his father, starts to dig up information about the Chandrian. And not because he wants to expose them to the world or just because he wants to fight them or anything, because they seem to be just legendary fictional figures in history. He wants to write songs about them and tell stories. It's all about the story. And just that innocent act of storytelling turns out to be more important than it actually seems to be at first, because the Chandrian do show up and they kill the storytellers for just for telling stories about them, and which kind of proves to Kvothe that the stories are true. So Kvothe has no choice but to leave his troop, who's no longer around anyway, and so he goes in search of answers. He uses what he's learned so far from his teacher, who joins them on the road for a little while, about magic, and he's recommended to like the most popular university in the world, the University of Magic. It's just called the University, but it's where they teach magic and alchemy, and the magic system in this is called sympathy, which I think is a really profound, like a poignant name for a magic system, because one thing that Patrick Rothfuss does really well is outlining how the system of magic works to an almost scientific degree. Sympathy is like basically like voodoo in a way. It's like linking one object to another with magic words or with an incantation or a symbol, and then you move one thing and it moves the other. It's like symmetry, but it's sympathy, and it uses your own body energy. It is magic, but it's something you put yourself into, and it has to do with the physical world and the properties between two objects. And there are classes about this at this university where Kvothe ends up going. But see, so yeah, Kvothe ends up going off on his own on the road to this university to learn about sympathy, and where they also have a big archive, a huge library, the biggest library in the world, and he hopes to find information about the people who killed his parents there. So yeah, so he can get revenge on them. It's basically a revenge story or an avenging story, a story about him trying to make sense of his life and the loss that he's experienced as a child. He's determined, and you're with him through this because it's told from his point of view. It's a first-person story, but it's only a first-person story within the story, because really this whole tale of Kvothe going to the university is being told by him in the future, where he is a simple barkeep. He is the owner of a tavern called the Waystone Inn, and he's just telling... The only reason he's telling his story at all, this particular cycle of days, which is the all-encompassing outline for the core story, is because another storyteller comes out of nowhere, someone who went to the university, a guy named the Chronicler. He travels all the way out, having heard rumors that Kvothe still lived, and that he was just this unassuming barkeep somewhere. And so the Chronicler shows up and asks Kvothe to tell his story. And Kvothe has been trying to keep his story a secret now, just like the Chandrian have been trying to keep themselves a secret, which is kind of like oh, you're becoming the very thing you hate sort of thing. But he does persuade Kvothe to tell his story. And so Kvothe's in this bar. He goes by a different name, Coat. He's just the local guy who runs the bar. And Kvothe, the person he used to be, is a legend who people aren't even sure really existed. And all the rumors and legends have gotten spun out of control. And the actual deeds he did, though they are great, have been blown up to more than epic proportions. But what would a story be if Kvothe, in retrospect, never actually did amazing things? He does actually accomplish a lot, especially in the next book. In the Name of the Wind, he's just getting started. He's learning sympathy. He's making his friends at the university. But in The Wise Man's Sphere, he goes on to bigger and greater things. But we're reviewing this one for now. So yeah, Kvothe, adult Kvothe in the Waystone Inn is telling the Chronicler this story. Adult Coat has his own apprentice named Bast, who is like this fey creature guy. How he meets him, we still don't even know. But the three of them are just gathered around a table in the inn, surrounding the people coming and going throughout the day, the locals, the regulars at the inn. And so meanwhile the chronicler is jotting this all down, writing this all down, as Kvothe is orally telling his story. So that's the framework for the core story. But the core story is Kvoth, young boy, an Edie Maru trooper, bright red hair. It's becomes a significant symbolism for his character, like the red, flaming red, true red. The mainly recognizable feature between Kvoth and Kote. He's going on this journey to avenge his parents. And the story is so much more than that, because it's his relationships with the people he meets on the road to the university and at the university. This young woman he meets on the road named Denna, who weaves in and out of his life. She's sort of a manic pixie-ish character, but she's deeper than that if you give her a chance. Again, we don't get into anybody's head except for Kvoth. He's the central character. He's in every single scene. The story never deviates from him. So we see every other character through his lens. And that's okay, because that's the point of this. But Denna, totally the woman he idealizes the most. She's totally this free-spirited, kind of promiscuous young woman who really is just trying to make her way in the world. But she does that by latching onto men and taking their money and trying to get, a patron she discovers she herself has musical talent. She's trying to make her way in the world, but she uses her unique talents as a woman and the way society treats women to her advantage. And Kvoth has to learn how to deal with that and to see the person underneath all of that. At the university, he meets best friend characters. Simon and Willem become his two buddies. There's people of all ages at the university, older and younger. There's a bully character named Ambrose, who's, again, the Harry Potter parallels. Ambrose is sort of like Malfoy. Simon is sort of like Ron. Willem is sort of like Hermione. It's kind of funny. Or like Fella maybe is like Hermione, the smart girl, But he's surrounded by a lot of good influences, and he makes close friends. And then there are, of course, the professors, or the what are they called? The masters. They're not called professors there, but they're masters who specialize in different subjects and teach different classes. There's like the artificer guy, the big burly guy who teaches the tool making and stuff like that. But of course there is Elodin, who is the master namer, which is the most abstract subject, like naming things. It sounds like English class almost, but it's like the deeper names of things, the subconscious names of things. And it is like almost like a Zen sort of state of mind to know those things, or like a meditative state. And Elodin, who is this quirky, eccentric guy who seems too immature to really be a master, but he teaches these classes and none of the students really understand him. Yet Kvoth finds himself latching on to Elodin the most, because and naming becomes one of the most important subjects to Kvoth, hence finding the name of the wind, hence the title. So yeah, there's things like that. And of course Ari, the character for whom the band is named, a former university student who Kvoth meets, who lives in the underground of the university, the sewers. She's kind of a mysterious character. The Slow Regard of Silent Things novella is about her, and from her point of view, the one part of this whole saga that is told from a different point of view, and it's really just her small world under the earth. But I found it fascinating because she, let's just say she has certain mannerisms that reminded me of myself. But yeah, so anyway, there's tons of characters in this book and in this whole series. And so Kvoth, in getting to the university, he goes through years of wandering on the road and being homeless on the streets. And he becomes resourceful and he becomes fierce, so that when he meets the strong-willed people and the enemies he makes around the university, he's ready to take them on. And his cunning that he develops throughout that is what begins to turn him into a legend and what gets people talking. As he finds trouble and mischief, and he doesn't back away from it, because he will stop at nothing to get the answers he seeks and the power that he seeks. Which is what makes Kvoth such a powerful character, and which makes the whole series amazing, is because that character who's at the center of this is someone the reader wants to know all about. Without Kvoth, this book and the series is nothing, obviously. So usually I like books that, develop more than one character or are an ensemble cast, or you there's not just one character that's the crux of the whole thing, but that is what is special about this book, and it's really special about this book. So Rothfuss also put, you can tell he put a ton of time and world building into it and effort, and it pays off. So as of now, I definitely recommend The Name of the Wind just for the sake of itself. And then once you read this, I can guarantee you're going to want to read the second one called The Wise Man's Fear. And then you're going to have to wait with the rest of us to for the third book to come out. It's going to be called The Doors of Stone, I believe. I believe that is the confirmed name of the third book. That might change. I don't know when the third book's going to come out. Hopefully not in another 10 years, because that might set a record for the longest gap in a series. I don't know. George R.R. Martin is in competition with that, I suppose. But regardless, I recommend it. It is probably the best fantasy book of the last decade, if in the last 2 decades at least, not at least, but the best modern work of fantasy, or the most ambitious at the very least. So go check it out. The Name of the Wind. Check out the band Ari. And I'm going to be silent now, because the silence will spread itself into 3 parts. Alexa, play Seaside Sounds.